Welcome to episode 20 of Juan's World. I'm going to be talking about the onion family today and for the next couple of videos. And here we have a picture from my favorite cookbook of all time, Robert Carrier's Great Dishes of the World. It was my first ever cookbook. I got it when I was around 20. And it started me off on a long trail of cooking. Here's his image of French onion soup. Very delicious looking picture. Mine won't look quite the same, but just as delicious. But I want to start with the onion family in general. So let's look at a few pictures of my shopping and of what can be found in the garden and in markets. So I spent a couple of days going around the markets here in Phnom Penh trying to find as many of the onion family as I possibly could, and some of them are easy to find, some of them are impossible to find, some of them are difficult to find. Here we have onions as you probably know them, a Spanish onion, sometimes called a yellow onion, on the left, and a red onion on the right. And the Spanish onion is what people normally just think of as onions when they do their cooking. The red onion is normally used for specialty purposes. Then I found this little grouping. It's got leeks on the left and some green onions of various sorts. Next to the leeks are some very thin, almost like chives, but they are still onions. And then further towards the right, spring onions and not leeks, but kind of leeks to the far right. Hard to explain. They're all a little bit different. And in Khmer, they're all called leaf onions, which is a pretty fair name, I guess. They're used mostly for their green tops. I'll be talking about them in the third video. I'll be talking about leeks in the second video and talking about onions in the first one. Now let's also look at some members of the onion family that are not as common. This is chives, but with the flowers attached. And then, of course, garlic is a member of the onion family also. We'll talk about garlic probably in the fourth episode. Shallots, which I cannot find to save my life in Phnom Penh, although they may exist, but I can't find them. And I'll therefore not be having any recipes of them. But then finally, my own little garden, I grew onions from seed, and I also grow garlic and garlic chives, just so that I have just little bits of ornamental or decorative pieces for soups and so forth. All right, let's get started with French onion soup. Not complicated, but I'm going to take the French onion soup to its final stages and turn it into onion gravy. So, got some sliced up white onions, Just turn on the heat to low. I'm just going to very, very gently simmer them in olive oil. And I've done this before in cottage pie recipes, so I'm not going to spend too long on it, but I do want to emphasize the fact that here when we're making French onion soup, we need to poach the onions very, very carefully so that they turn golden and then brown all over without burning, but so that they get a good, intense, rich flavor. And right now, just doing it very, very slowly. We'll come back in about 5 minutes when things have started to heat up a little bit, and we'll just continue the progress. I won't take you through the whole process in about 30-35 minutes, but I'll show you the stages along the way. Here we are, about 5 minutes in. You can see the olive oil is bubbling nicely, not too strenuously, but nicely enough. And I'm going to keep just worrying the onions around because I don't want them to burn. I want them to brown evenly. And you can see that it's going to take a fair while because there's quite a few onions in the pot. So now we're 10 minutes in, and you'll see that the onions are not really turning color because they're still losing a lot of moisture, and it's taking time, and I want to do it slowly and make sure that it's all even. The thing that has to happen first is that the moisture in the onions, and in this case there's a lot of moisture. The first time in a very, very long time when I sliced up onions, and I've been crying all over the place. Normally that doesn't happen, but today it did. So these are really, really juicy onions, and I need to get all of that moisture cooked off, and then they will start turning color golden and then a lighter brown. All right, yet another 5 minutes, and you can see now that there's starting to be some flecks of golden, and I need to be especially careful now. I need to keep worrying it around so that nothing gets overcooked. As I mentioned in the video on cottage pie, the main virtue here is patience. Just keep stirring and keep worrying around, making sure everything's even. You can see it's getting more and more golden as we go along. Now, over here I have simmering a little pot of beef broth that I made from beef and beef bones. That's going to be the basis of the soup when the onions are ready to go in. Okay, you can see another 5 minutes has passed and they're getting really golden. Won't be too much longer now before I'm ready to put them into the soup. But we want to get them as golden as possible because that's where all the taste comes from. It's from the caramelized sugars in the onion. Well, now just a couple more minutes and we're going to be ready to turn the golden onions into the broth and start making the French onion soup. Alright, so now the onions are in the stock and I'm just going to heat it through, and then I'm going to let it simmer for 1 hour so that the tastes will all combine together. And then I'm going to let it cool overnight so that they marry even more. So here's the finished soup. I would normally, if I had an oven-proof earthenware crock, I would have put the soup in the crock, then added some roundels of French bread and put some melting cheese on top, and then run it under the broiler so that the cheese would melt and get all gooey in the soup and everything. But I don't have any oven-proof crocks these days. It's one of the dangers of moving all over the place. So instead what I did was I heated the soup, put it in bowls, and meanwhile I ran a couple of roundels of French bread with cheese on top under the broiler and then popped them in the soup. It works out about the same. So now let's turn our attention to the onion soup becoming onion gravy. Onion gravy is one of the great classic gravies of English cooking, especially with bangers and mash, and that's what I want to do next. So let's look at putting the onion soup into a skillet again, adding some thickener, and we'll go from there. So here's the onion soup turned into a skillet again, added a little bit of thickening, and now I'm just cooking it down. And I also need to get some bangers and make some mash, and then we'll have sausage and mash with onion gravy. Delicious. So having cooked the gravy down so that it's nice and thick and rich, I've made some mashed potato, and I've also fried up a few bangers or sausages, and not really English sausages. I live in Cambodia. It's very hard to get English bangers. These are okay, they'll do. They'll make bangers and mash for one time for me. And next time I'm going to change out the onions for leeks, and I'm going to ask the question, and I don't know the answer yet. If we can make French onion soup, can we change the onions for leeks and make French leek soup? Well, click subscribe and like, and you will find out next time.